I go sometime even in the Ministry of Defense, I will not find even some commanders there in their offices. I know this. I've been telephoning several times, checking with them, I can't find.
A continent's abundant natural resources can in so many cases have so little effect on its people's quality of life over so many years that has been the case of Africa. Dictatorship is one of the many forms that is prevalent on the continent of Africa. As we have seen happen multiple times, as many African leaders take office as a democratic leader, but oftentimes, the hunger for power drives them to become dictators. If you really want to call a spade, then you have to accept that the great African continent has had her fair share of horrible dictators. After rising above colonialism between the 1950s to the early 90s, some of the continent's nations failed to rise above dictatorial governments.
Has always expressed its commitment to dialogue as a means of resolving our internal differences. We have demonstrated this by our individual and collective efforts at holding consultation at all strata of our society. You will recall that in spite of these overtures and good gestures by government, Chief MKO Abiola flagrantly perpetuated acts which breached the laws of the land, but government in its magnanimity never gave him serious attention. His most recent action of declaring himself the President and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
Sani Abacha was a Nigerian general who ruled as the military head of state of Nigeria from 1993 until his death in 1998. He seized power on November 17, 1993 in the last successful coup d'etat in the military history of Nigeria. He was the Chief of Army Staff between 1985 to 1990, Chief of Defense Staff between 1990 to 1993, and Minister of Defense. Abacha became the first Nigerian army officer to attain the rank of a full military general without skipping a single rank. Abacha was the defense minister and most senior official within the military hierarchy during the crisis of the Third Republic. He orchestrated the coup d'etat of 1993, which overthrew the interim national government of Ernest Shonkan. In his nationwide broadcast, Abacha portrayed the overthrow as an act of stability brought about through the socio-political uncertainties caused by the 1993 presidential election. Abacha was credited in revamping the Nigerian economy. Abacha's administration oversaw an increase in the country's foreign exchange reserves from $494 million in 1993 to $9.6 billion by the middle of 1997, and reduced the external debt of Nigeria from $36 billion in 1993 to $27 billion by 1997. Don't let the economic growth fool you. Abacha was a tyrant. It was in his administration that stealing of state funds was prevalent. It was said that billions of dollars were stolen by Abacha. This money was kept in offshore accounts. Abacha was notorious for the execution of political rivals and opponents. It is estimated that more than 500 opponents were killed by Abacha.
By our individual and collective efforts at holding consultation at all strata of our society. You will recall that in spite of these overtures and good gestures by government, Chief MKO Abiola flagrantly perpetuated acts which breached the laws of the land, but government in its magnanimity never gave him serious attention.
It is not in anybody's best interest to hold United Nations personnel, and we want to to thank them for release.
On April 26, 2012, former Liberian President Charles Taylor is found guilty of carrying out horrific war crimes against the people of Liberia, which includes rape, sex trafficking, child trafficking, murder and mutilation. His trial was the first time a former head of state is tried in an international court since the Nuremberg trials of Nazi leaders after World War II. Taylor was found guilty of aiding and abetting a notoriously brutal rebel force who murdered, raped, forced sexual slavery, built a child army and mined diamonds to pay for guns. Taylor's road to war crime started after he escaped a U.S. jail, where he was waiting to be extradited for embezzlement. Taylor made it from his jail cell to Libya, where he started the militia group National Patriotic Front of Liberia, NPFL. With his newly formed militia, he overthrew the regime of Samuel Doe in 1989. The upheaval plunged the country into a 14-year bloody civil war. By the end, 200,000 were killed in the fighting and more than half of the population became refugees. After a peace deal was made to end the civil war, Taylor was elected Liberia's president until he was forced out in 2003. During his reign, Taylor is said to have meddled in another civil war raging in Sierra Leone. Witnesses said he sold guns to, and arranged attacks for, rebel groups in exchange for blood diamonds. However, Taylor wasn't just aiding a rebellion. He was also perpetuating horrific brutality. Over 50,000 were killed, and thousands more were mutilated in the more than a decade-long civil war. The rebels were known to amputate limbs, rape women, enslave survivors of their attacks and force boys into child armies. After a peace deal was made to end the civil war, Taylor was elected Liberia's president until he was forced out in 2003. During his reign, Taylor is said to have meddled in another civil war raging in Sierra Leone. Witnesses said he sold guns to, and arranged attacks for, rebel groups in exchange for blood diamonds. However, Taylor wasn't just aiding a rebellion. He was also perpetuating horrific brutality. Over 50,000 were killed, and thousands more were mutilated in the more than a decade-long civil war. The rebels were known to amputate limbs, rape women, enslave survivors of their attacks and force boys into child armies. Taylor denied the accusations, but once put on trial in 2006, 115 witnesses, including victims of rape and mutilation, testified against him.
How do you force
Radio and telephone
peace?
intercepts used in the case
I think peacekeeping is proper.
من الصحراء إلى الصحراء، وسنزحف أنا والملايين لتطهير ليبيا شبر شبر، بيت بيت.
Following the Libyan uprising and revolution in 2011, the longtime dictator Muammar Gaddafi was overthrown and killed on the streets of Libya, ending 4 decades of authoritarian rule over the oil-rich North African country. Born on June 7, 1942 in the city of Sirte, and raised in a Bedouin tent in the Libyan desert, Gaddafi belonged to a tribal family named Al-Qadhafa in an era when Libya was under Italian colonial control. The country gained independence in 1951 under the rule of King Idris, an ally of the West. In 1961, Gaddafi entered the military college in the city of Benghazi, influenced highly by the growing Arab nationalist movement and in awe of the ideology's figurehead in the form of Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser. Once in power, one of Gaddafi's primary concerns was ensuring that he stayed there. He particularly felt threatened following an attempted coup by his fellow officers in December 1969, as a result of which he introduced laws criminalizing political protest and dissent. A key attribute of his rule was his vehement anti-imperialism, causing him to expel Italians from Libya who had remained there following its independence, ordering the closure of British and American military bases within the country, and demanding that the foreign oil companies operating there should share more of their revenues with the government. Gaddafi also implemented cultural and religious measures against foreign and imperial influence, including the replacement of the Gregorian calendar with the Islamic version, and forbidding the sale of alcohol.